Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. If I am a Florida Gator fan that follows the recruiting trail heading into this weekend, my Twitter notifications are turned on. I'm certainly tapped into Hayes Fawcett because you expect a couple of commitments to pop over the next couple of days. And kind of has to deal with what we've talked about really the last couple of months. This Florida program has a lot of momentum behind it, specifically on the recruiting trail. Now, that momentum did not necessarily manifest itself into commitments heading into the summer. Well, we're starting to see that momentum turn itself into commitments pretty damn quickly. Want to get into some of the names that will be on campus this weekend for Florida. And I'll say this is the weekend where I'd want to have the most momentum on my back. Some of the biggest targets for Florida making their official visits to Gainesville this weekend. A couple of unofficial visitors, too, who are returning to Gainesville, guys that are certainly on commitment watch. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, the Florida fans, I can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. We got that Florida Gator commitment sweatshirt right on the chair. When it happens this weekend, if it happens, we certainly will be breaking it down. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. And let's start with some unofficial visitors who will be back on campus in Gainesville this weekend. Let's start with four-star running back Carson Baker. This is a guy that's certainly on commitment watch. Really productive at the high school ranks, but I don't have to work too hard to sell the Florida fans on Carson Baker. He is 6 foot, 200 pounds, runs a 10.65 in the 100-meter dash, legitimate home run hitting ability with the long speed. And what fires me up about this potential addition to Florida is I think the athletic profile to this kid is absolutely elite. You know, you turn on the film and say there are certain things that I think Carson Baker can improve upon in terms of purely running the football, a little bit better vision, a little bit better feel. Florida's been developing running backs just about as good as anybody in the country. I expect that Florida Gator running back room going into 2025 to be one of the better running back rooms that we see in the country. And so you're taking a kid that has all the traits that you are looking for at the running back position, putting him in a program that we expect to have a good offensive line, that has been developing running backs at a very high level. This one makes a lot of sense and a very, very exciting player. And, credit Florida, going head to head with some of the biggest programs in the country for Carson Baker. And it sounds like they're in a really good spot to land the commitment of this kid. Very similar, Jerela McCoy. Hey, this is another guy that was already on campus for his official visit, going to be returning to Gainesville for an unofficial visit. It was largely coming down to Florida and Texas. Cancels his official visit to Texas. Going to be back in Gainesville this weekend. You expect that Florida might wrap this one up too. I think he's supposed to commit on July 1st. Wouldn't be surprised if we push that commitment date up a little bit. Another kid I like, and another kid that's raw, that is a little bit of a tweener in terms of could be a 3-tech, could play out on the edge. There are some big-time physical traits that Jerela McCoy brings to the table, and I kind of trust Coach Chapman and company to maximize what this kid can be. I think when I say tweener to the Florida Gator fans, you maybe think of a guy like Kelby Collins. Look, I think it could have worked out for Kelby Collins. I think what went wrong for Kelby is you just didn't really pick a spot. You saw him have some success out on the edge. You decide to move inside. You don't fully commit to the position change, and it didn't really work out in year two. Heck, I still think he would have been a good football player for Florida had he given the position change some time. I think the big thing for Jerela McCoy is, hey, let's pick a position and let this kid develop at that position for the next couple of years. I think the big thing here is the big-time physical traits. He's got some length, and he's got some athleticism, and you stick him out there on the edge. I think that power that he has, the heavy hands, going to give him a lot of success. If you move him to the inside, that length, that athleticism, going to give a lot of interior offensive linemen some problems. Getting into some more official visitors that will be on campus, man, it starts in the front seven. It specifically starts on the defensive line, and this has been a story that we've talked about a lot that now it's time to go out and close on some of these top names. Look, the 2026 cycle in terms of big bodies in the middle of the defensive line, it's not loaded like it was last year. So these priority guys become a little bit more important. Let's start with Kendall Gerville, Fort Myers, Florida. I love the multi-sport background that he brings to the table. Wrestled in his early high school career, also as a weightlifter. You see the wrestling and weightlifting background on the football field in a big time way. Number one, he's a really big kid. He is all of 315 pounds that he's listed at, but moves really, really well. Because of that wrestling background, knows how to play with leverage. Because of that weightlifting background, he's a very powerful and strong kid. That's a good combination. When you know how to play with good leverage and you're one of the strongest football players on the field, that's when you start giving interior offensive linemen a lot of problems. And I think Kendall Gerville, to me, he's one of the safest bets in terms of interior defensive linemen that you see in the 2026 cycle. Now, it's a heavy hitting recruitment, right? Georgia, Texas, all in on him. This is what stands out to me about Florida is we are going up against historically some of the best programs across the country, some of the best recruiting programs across the country, and going out and winning these battles. You saw at the tail end of 2025. You're starting to see it a little bit more in 2026 as well. You talk about Florida, at least in my opinion, getting back to where they belong in the college football landscape. It starts with beating teams out like Georgia and Texas on the recruiting trail. And it's kind of the direction we're seeing them go, especially for the players that historically have made Georgia such a dominant program. Line of scrimmage, interior defensive line dudes. How about Valden Stone? A little bit of a different kind of cat. Kendall Gerville, to me, really safe guy that you kind of know is going to be a good football player. Valden Stone, a little bit more boomer bust is probably the best way to say it, but the the potential upside is astronomical. Very similar to Joseph Mabachu in the 2025 class. Like, this kid is new to football. You can very much tell that he's new to football, but then you just see him go out there and play. He's like a bull in a china shop. Big body that carries the weight exceptionally well, massive developmental upside. And again, I'm about to make my for Twitter, I've been doing some lists of coaches. I'm ranking my defensive line coaches right now, and I don't know how many coaches I'm putting over Coach Chapman. And so I look at a guy like Valden Stone coming to Florida and say, man, that this makes so much sense. It's not going to be year one. It's probably not going to be year two. If this kid puts it together, he's going to be a very, very good football player for Florida over the next couple of years. Oklahoma, Nebraska also went on Valden Stone. I think Florida's probably in the driver's seat when it comes to this recruitment. Last one that we'll just see if Florida can get some momentum in. I think this one is probably like Georgia, Miami are the two teams that are headlining this group, but Florida's certainly in there. James Johnson transferred to Miami Northwestern this year. And so obviously in Miami's backyard, that probably gives Miami the edge. Here's what I'll say about these three guys we just talked about. Go 2 out of 3. I don't care which two it is. You go 2 out of 3 with Jameer Perez already locked in. I feeling really good about what the defensive line play is going to look like for Florida, where you have a lot of depth, you have a lot of size, and especially in a defensive line cycle that I don't think is great. You go land some of the better 2 out of 3 or some of the better defensive linemen that we see in the 2026 cycle. If you're a Florida fan, you're feeling great about that. I'd probably rank it Kendall Gerville 1, Valden Stone 2, James Johnson 3. I like all three of them a lot. Land 2 out of 3, feel really good about what your defensive line class looks like. How about Trent Henderson? And this kid kind of close to the vest. It's really hard to get a feel for where his recruitment is. It sounds like Florida is as in the mix as anybody in the country. The ideal like Jack linebacker for Florida. I think this is what's unique about Trent Henderson is I love the football player. There are some programs where the fit might be a little bit murky. It ain't murky for Florida. Like, you know exactly what role he's going to play. I think he could be like the next George Gums 2.0. What I'm most excited about with Trent Henderson, there's a ton of length. It's an elite first step. There's some natural power in his hands, but I think there's a long ways to go in terms of what that body can look like. Get this kid early enrolled in January. see what that body looks like after that first 6 months within a Division I program in the weight room. That's where I think you unlock the real potential for a guy like Trent Henderson. And once again, I'll say that the development of these line of scrimmage players on the defensive line in Gainesville, Florida is elite. I think it's going to be one of the better defensive lines that we see in the country, especially the headliners. Maybe you have some question marks about the depth of the defensive line, but you talk about Tyreek Sapp, talk about potentially George Gomes, you obviously talk about Caleb Banks. There are 3 guys who are probably going to go in the top 50 of the NFL draft next year. That matters when you're recruiting these guys out of the high school ranks. This is a massive weekend for Florida to really develop that defensive line play. And that's where you want to get these guys, because as Florida fans know, it's really hard to go address this position in the portal. If you want an elite defensive line, you better be winning these recruitments at the high school ranks. Number 5 on the list, and this kid, another kid that I really do like, Cloud Mapoma. Now, I think his nickname is Puma. That's very similar to Valden Stone, just at the offensive tackle position. He is very new to the sport. He actually moved to the United States to pursue basketball. He's 6'7", 300 pounds. Like, buddy, we got to put the pads and the helmet on you and see what you look like on the football field. Well, he looks really dang good. And what stands out to me about this one is he's much farther along. For a guy that has a pure basketball background that did not grow up playing football, you turn on the junior year film and say, I wouldn't have known. Like, I'm kind of stunned that he hasn't played football all his life. It's very natural to him. Now, that's not to say that there's not some development that needs to take place, but he's a very functional athlete with the ideal frame at that offensive tackle position. You land him to go along with Chancellor Campbell. I like the prototypes that Florida has in that tackle room, and this kid has immense upside because the athleticism and the raw power. You know, the thing with Chancellor Campbell is I like the length, I like the feet. How powerful can he be as a tackle is probably a question. This kid, he's a naturally powerful individual that shocks opposing defensive linemen when he gets his hands on him. Yeah, and there's some things that need to get cleaned up. Big time upside for this kid. We'll see if Florida can get it done. And another thing I'll add here is Florida has, for a lack of better terms, earned the right to grab a kid like this. You know, if you didn't have a ton of tackle depth, young tackle depth in your room, maybe you try to go somewhere else for a guy that's a little bit safer, because you've done a really good job of evaluating and recruiting this position. And you got a pretty dang deep offensive line that you kind of trust over the next couple of years. Go take a freaking flyer on this kid, because in 2 years, he could be an all SEC tackle. Familiar name that we'll round out this conversation with. And this is not even like cracking the surface of the names that are going to be on campus, but I wanted to highlight the guys that Florida seemingly have a good chance with. Isaiah Williams. Now, like, there's got to be a big asterisk with this. Is he even going to be on campus? That's an asterisk in and of itself. Number 2, do you even want the commitment of this kid that early? You know, I think he's on his 6th commitment right now. Obviously, was previously committed to Florida at a point. I still think the player is awesome. Now, does Billy Napier and this Florida staff want to pursue Isaiah Williams after all of these flip commitments is probably to be determined. But I'll say this with Billy Napier. He's had success with these, you know, kind of guys that might, and I don't like saying like these kids have red flags because I don't know them personally. Like guy like Hermione McLean, you weren't really sure if it was going to work. You take a flyer on him, maybe a little bit of a bumpy ride early, but seemingly is on track to be a really good football player for Florida. Billy Napier is going to do his due diligence. You know, he's not going to add a guy that he doesn't think is going to pan out for Florida. I still think this kid's an awesome football player. And he's going to be a really good football player if he can stay at a program and develop. You're still going to take a look at him. And again, are you pushing for a commitment coming out of the weekend? No, probably not. But you want to continue that relationship. So, hey, when it comes time to sign these papers, you know, Florida is still going to be a presence in this one. And if Billy Napier and the staff want to go out and try to add him to your roster, you probably got a damn good shot at doing so. We'll see how that looks. Wanted to add him because, again, I think he's awesome football player. We'll close it out there. A lot of other names that, I mean, you know, like Caden Prothro, it doesn't sound like Florida's leading, but, you know, we've seen Florida change the tides of recruitments from these official visits. A guy like Carson Baker takes his official visit to Florida as like an outside chance. Florida's just doing their due diligence, and they got a great shot at landing him. Florida's been changing recruitments. Whatever they're doing on these official visits has been elite. And you're looking for one more last one from Florida going into this weekend. We'll close it out there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with it. Ideally, that commitment sweatshirt sitting right there is going to come on at some point this weekend. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.